Hello, everybody, and welcome to Digital Marketing Masters. And today we're talking about PodCamp Toronto, which is an event. I would say it's a conference, but it's actually called the Unconference for a number of reasons, but we'll get to that later. So what we wanted to do is get everybody's takeaways, and we have several people here. We have Ben Albert, Marv, your co-host Mahek, and Sabrina Scott, as well as myself, Matt Rouse, and I think we'll just dive straight into it. Our first question is, what was your biggest takeaway from PodCamp? And I'm going to kind of kick it off by saying that I think that large groups of people, generally speaking, are just made up of smaller groups of people who are all happen to go to the same thing or the same place. And so all of us on the screen here, we're kind of one of those smaller groups of people. So we all met before the conference to have a little bit of dinner and some chit chat, and as well as through the conference, I got introduced to Instagram groups, which is something that I have not used before. Usually I try to avoid text groups and things like that, but in this case it was quite useful. And everybody, we were able to go out and like split up for lunch and like go hang out together at like the social event, and also introduce each other to other people that we knew at the events. So we weren't just hanging out with each other. We also kind of were able to bring people in. And I know like Ben Albert is from Rochester, New York, who I knew from his Grow Getters group and a number of events that we've been to in the United States. So I brought him in, and of course nobody from Toronto had met him before. And so I was able to make some connections that way. So I think it's important that you try and be a connector when you go to any kind of event, but it's especially easy at an event like PodCamp where everybody's really friendly and nice, and it's a low barrier to entry.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling on me because I literally wanted to dive right in, Matt. The one thing I had written down is shift from a host of a podcast to a producer of an experience. You just touched on it. Going on to an event like this, it's not just for the information, which I'm sure we'll dive into a lot of great takeaways, but it's creating an experience. It's creating connection. It's creating an unforgettable experience. And nowadays with AI podcasts, you could just have an AI write and read your whole show, but no one's going to tune in just for the AI. Maybe if it's like weather or news or something, quick bits. They show up for you. They show up for the host, and the host is the producer of an experience. So understanding your audience, understanding your fingerprint, what makes you different, and unique ways to stand out. It's funny because we talk about takeaways, and a lot of times when I go to a conference, I have like a short list of like tips and tricks that I learned, but it's the experiences, grabbing dinner with you guys, the after party, drinks, fun, goofing off. It's those experiences that in an AI world we remember the most, and our podcast creates an experience for the listener. We don't know why they're tuning in, what they're going through, what the purpose of them tuning in week by week is. But if we can create the best experience, and that's everything from the sound quality to the connection we have with them as an audience member, if we can think about this not as like a parasocial relationship where they're just lurking in and start a conversation with our listener, it creates that connection and experience. And a lot of speakers touched on this, but that was kind of a thorough, what's the word?
Or like a thread.
Thorough line.
Thread running through everything.
I've been traveling too much. Line. Yeah, this has been off script. A thorough line, Matt.
Sabrina, you had touched on this a little bit about how a lot of people there were thinking about having a podcast, but they were kind of scared to get started because maybe they couldn't build like the ultimate experience right out of the gate.
Yeah, for sure. Same as with you, this was my second PodCamp, but I'm super stoked about the whole thing. Like, I feel like I had a way more fun time this year than last year. But the interesting thing for me around that piece that you just brought up was how many of the same people I saw from last year, and hearing some of those folks, and like, bless them 100%. My heart goes out to them, but asking kind of the same questions as they asked last year around what microphone do I need? What software do I need? And getting really hung up on the tech pieces, or just those kind of like technical nitty-gritty aspects, which in my mind, like, don't really matter. I still record my podcast with my phone. No one has ever complained, ever. And I think one of the things I just hope that a lot of folks come away from PodCamp, and hopefully this conversation with, is if you want to start a podcast, just do it. Like, literally today, record something on your phone and put it on the internet. Like, take 2 hours out of your day and just do it. Is I really do think a lot of people make a mountain out of a molehill with podcasting, and make it a lot more complicated and bogged down with requirements than it really needs to be. And don't get me wrong, I love listening to like a well-produced, polished show, but I would much rather listen to something with like 5 cats meowing in the background, and like the sound quality a bit weird and the sniffles still in there, if what the person actually has to say is really, really interesting and compelling and valuable. So I wish that more people would.
Are you talking about hearing my chickens in the background? Because you can hear them here. I don't know if they're picked up on the mic or not.
I actually can't hear your chickens, but I would like to hear your chickens. So I think that would add something to the experience, especially in this era of AI and everything needing to kind of be polished and perfect. Like, I think the human imperfections are going to be part of what make human run podcasts like really stand out in the coming years.
It'll be a while before the AI system decides to put chickens in the background of the podcast. I think that's not high on their list. Marv, you used to record your podcast in person, right?
Yes, I did. Thanks for doing this, Matt. And yeah, this is the Pod Squad from
That's right.
From our trip, and it was really nice to reconnect with all of y'all. So last year I was like 2 episodes into my podcast when I attended PodCamp, and I had really high hopes. A lot of the technical things that Sabrina brought up were exactly what I was pursuing. You know, I wanted crystal clear audio. I'm a bit of a sound nerd. I love music. I dabbled in production, DJing. So I felt like I had to bring a minimum level of polish to this. And then I just realized it was so much work, and it got in the way of me getting into the room with the right people. So season 2 is a lot more online. I'm recording this on Riverside just so that I can get to the right people, get them in the right room with me. And I work remotely as well. So a big part of the motivation for meeting people in person for this podcast was to actually spend time with actual people in person. So yeah, I just found this PodCamp was a good way for me to reconnect with that idea in a big way, because podcasting is, contrary to what a lot of people think, fairly solitary an experience. And having people from all over the country and the world meeting up in Toronto, like, lucky for me, is really close to my house. But just to like meet over something that we're motivated to do, for a lot of us, it's not really paying all of the bills. It is just like a supplement. So this is a passion project for like 9 out of 10 people in the room. And to see people who are working extra hard over and above their responsibilities to do something they care about, I think, especially like not as a teenager or a kid, like we're all well into adulthood doing this. And I think there's an extra feeling of motivation you get from seeing other people thrive doing this. You get motivated to do more. And it just kind of, I felt like I was totally in the right place when I met all of y'all and got to spend time with this. So I think PodCamp, it was my second year, and I think I'm going to be back next year as well, because yeah, I'm already looking forward to it.
Yeah, we also have very different podcasts, which we can talk about in a minute. But you did touch on something about, you know, being in the right room and meeting people. And I know, Mahek, that you and I met at PodCamp, right? And, well, I mean, most of us, I met Ben elsewhere, but the rest of us met at PodCamp. But now, you know, a year and a bit later, you're, you know, working with our company, and you're, you know, starting to co-host season 8 of our podcast.
Yeah. Firstly, PodCamp weekend was fun. I had the most amazing time with the four of you, the Pod Squad, right? Honestly, when I first walked into PodCamp, I had no idea what it was. I was taking this course at George Brown College, and one of my professors, Marco, who was actually one of the speakers last year, said to me, Mahek, this might be interesting to you. So I walked in not really knowing what to expect, and I think it completely surprised me. The first thing that stood out to me was how inclusive everything felt, right? Because even though I was coming in as someone from the outside, from a new country, I never really felt like an outsider at PodCamp. And I think that's pretty remarkable for a community that's been around for like more than 15 years, I think. I think this was their 15th or the 16th year. I heard someone say that at the PodCamp. But I think what I love about PodCamp is that it may not make the kind of noise that some of the massive conferences do, right? But what it has built over the years is something I think so much stronger. I feel it has a very strong sense of community. It's a very authentic community. It's close knit, but at the same time, it's really welcoming as well. So yeah, last year I met some amazing people. Matt, as we already mentioned, Matt being one of them, and now we actually work together. And this year I got to reconnect with the same people. Sabrina, I remember you from last year as well, and of course met Marv, Benjamin. I remember Manisha was really great. I loved her session, and so many others. Right, my followers sort of went up by 30. So that's great. I did a lot of networking. Um, I think what's also beautiful is the diversity in the room. I was speaking to a few more people who were also like new in the country, and they all felt the same way. Like it was pretty diverse. Even though this happens in Toronto, right? People travel in. Benjamin, you drove in from the States, and Matt flew in from Nova Scotia, and you see people from like all kinds of backgrounds. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that as an immigrant myself, I feel like spaces like PodCamp really matter. It felt like it was open to newcomers, professionals, and also open to people who are just curious, right? It sort of meets you where you are, and I think you can't really underestimate the power of walking into one of those rooms and walking out all recalibrated in like 100 different ways. So for me, I think the biggest takeaway is that PodCamp has built something really special. I think it's the big sense of community and all of the things that I just mentioned. Yeah.
Right. I should also mention that we don't own PodCamp or anything. We're not affiliated with them in any way. I know it can sound a bit like a PodCamp commercial, but it's really just, it's a community event that we went to, and I think it's also very accessible, that event, because they do have free options for tickets. You know, like if you're a student or something, or you're not, whatever the reason, they don't even ask. They're just like, yeah, you can go. So, I mean, it's great to have everybody be there. Does anybody have like a takeaway that you wanted to implement in your business or your show or anything like that?
My big like non-business, non-show takeaway is that socializing and like the outside of official conference programming stuff was actually some of my favorite aspect of PodCamp, was like hanging out with you guys in our like adventure pre-conference, post-conference scheduled networking hangouts. Like to me, those were where some of the most interesting conversations happened. And in contrast to last year, this year I actually did go to like every single session. I think last year I skipped the networking, and I also skipped the morning on Sunday because I just wanted to sleep. But this year I went to literally everything. And still, that being said, like some of my favorite, most learning-y, thought-provoking conversations were honestly like between sessions with people in the hallways, or honestly like hanging out with you guys or other folks like over dinner or drinks or whatever it was. And I do feel like with these things, there is that kind of explicit curriculum in terms of what is actually being taught in the sessions. And then there's kind of that fun implicit curriculum that happens like in after hours or in kind of in those in between liminal moments. And I think that's where a lot of the value of these type of events, whether it's PodCamp or something else, really is. And I think a lot of the time with our online world, a lot of folks are kind of optimizing in this kind of extreme way. And I think sometimes we forget to make time for the spontaneity or going off script. And sometimes it is worth it to skip a session, to like extend lunch just a little bit longer, to have a conversation, and just to give ourselves permission to just go with the flow and lean into those kind of spontaneous, very human moments. Like that for me is one of my big things that I took away from the weekend. There's a few other things, but I'll let everyone else go.
Well, do you have an example of something in those conversations that was outside of the kind of structured conference learning?
Honestly, one of the most interesting chats I had was with Marv over our extended lunch, where we accidentally ended up skipping like a session, and just chatting with him about some of the stuff that he's into. And I think we ended up having, I don't know how you feel about it, Marv, but I thought the conversation was super interesting, just around some of the stuff that you do, which I don't really know too much about. I don't know anything about crypto or a lot of those kind of things that you do for your work. And we were getting into the pretty nitty gritty of like AI and the workforce and how like all of these different things are kind of happening. And that was really fun for me because I just work by myself doing coaching and tarot. So I don't get the opportunity to chat with folks who are doing that type of thing at a really high level very often. And all of that stuff, like all of those things that we talked about, all those insights, like, can I apply that to what I do and to my insights on podcasting and business and all of that? Like, absolutely. But that wasn't my intention actually in having that conversation. It was just something that was purely driven by curiosity and just wanting to learn more. And the takeaways, I'm sure like that will happen later. But I think part of what I'm trying to say here is the importance of following that curiosity, no matter what it's about, even if there's no clear like business application in your own business. Like it really, in my mind, doesn't matter. Like the point is like following the curiosity and being open to what other folks are up to, even if like it's not necessarily quote unquote relevant to your business right now. Like it doesn't really matter. Like for me, it's just keeping the curiosity and the spontaneity and the serendipity of human interactions like that just alive and leaning into it rather than running away from it.
I think that there's a lot to be said for the things you can learn outside of your own industry. It's kind of cross-discipline approach to podcasting or anything with business, right? Is where you're going to learn a lot of things that maybe everybody in your industry doesn't touch on ever. We should actually once quick go over everybody's show. Ben, do you want to tell us about your podcast?
Real Business Connections. I'm just having real raw conversations with business leaders, entrepreneurs, but everything from like folks that have escaped a cult to sales strategy. So it's really the human behind the human, the story behind the story, and having those real conversations and connections with successful business people. It's pretty fun.
Mahek, you started a podcast, but you haven't launched yours yet, right?
Yeah, I'm still recording. I think I've done my promo and I've recorded 2 episodes. I took Sabrina's advice and I stopped thinking about it a lot and I just went at it. But yeah, mine's called Between Now and Next with Mahek. Last year at PodCamp, I had this moment where I just realized that we were all between now and next. And I was between now and next. And then I got to thinking that, how we often feel like we're not the person we used to be. And we're also not fully where we want to be yet, right? And we're just floating in between in that messy middle. And I was like, why is no one talking about it? So I'm like, let me just talk about it. So I feel like I represent that learner's voice. And I acknowledge that I'm in the messy middle and I'm probably going to be there for the rest of my life. And I just want to talk about it.
Nice. Marv?
So Sabrina, yeah, thanks. It was thanks for introing the podcast somewhat because I work in the tech space and I want to use my podcast. My podcast is called "Is This the New Internet?" and it's deliberately a question. And each episode, I interview someone who has an experience on the internet and that they're trying to improve this experience for other people. They can either be a creator, a builder, a founder, someone putting an idea in motion that they believe will somewhat improve or add to the incredible diversity of ideas on the internet. So I work in crypto. I work in a fairly atypical part of crypto, though. it's public goods funding using crypto. That's not exactly what a lot of people will initially associate crypto with. And I kind of want to continue that, I work in a niche. So I want to like talk to other people who are operating in similar weird and wonderful places and sort of sit down with them for like an hour, let them talk at length to explain their motivations, their origin stories, and sort of what they hope to get out of this. Because tech, I believe, can be a net good if people kind of understand what they're getting into, they understand how it can play into their lives. And I sort of want to open up that conversation for as many people as possible, because my parents are religious listeners to this podcast, and they don't want me babbling on about the intricacies of Web3 and crypto. Like, for them, it's like, what does this weird technology mean in my life? How does this matter to me? So yeah, that's the goal. And I'm in season 2 right now, so hopefully you can look forward to seeing some people from all over the world participating, not just those who can come to my party room here in Toronto.
Hey, Sabrina, do you want to tell us about your show?
Yeah, I actually have 2 now, believe
Right.
it or not. So my first one is called The Secrets of a Witch podcast. It's been going for 3 years now, 235 episodes. And so that's my solo show. So it's all about life, love, healing, spirituality, how to live a good life, how to heal your shit. So I talk about various things, anything from witchcraft and tarot to interpersonal psychology and deep trauma stuff. So that one I really, really love. And then this year, 2026, I started a conversational show called The Heal and Harm Show. And that is where I'm interviewing folks who are in various aspects of spirituality or wellness or some kind of self-improvement, something or other. And we talk about that kind of balance between the healing and the harm. It's like, I think a lot of time people end up in, let's say, some kind of self-help situation, whether that is spiritual or movement oriented or whatever happens to be, and then they end up more messed up at the end of it. Like maybe they join a cult or they end up with a really toxic group in their spiritual space, or something goes wrong. And I'm really, really interested in teasing out like why that is. Why does that happen in the spiritual industry sometimes? Why does that happen in wellness? And so super interesting series of conversations. And that one comes out every second Monday. And as of this particular recording, we actually had my fifth, I think, episode come out. So a bunch more kind of in the pipes, but it's been a blast.
And if you're listening to this is episode 278 of Digital Marketing Masters podcast. After 8 years now, we've been doing this. And Mahek is our co-host now. We talk about, obviously, digital marketing, mostly something to do with AI now, since we're in the age of AI. And every guest I have on my show is somebody who works in the trenches of what they do. I don't have people on my show if they do not have what I would call clear or I guess verifiable expertise. I guess that brings us to also part of the second question is there anything else that anybody wanted to mention that they learned at PodCamp or, from us, which you've probably heard 2 or 3 of us now mention Pod Squad. That's what the people at PodCamp called us. So we were labeled the Pod Squad because we kind of hung out together, which I think is kind of fun.
Well, the main thing that I kind of remember was the analytics around YouTube being kind of the way of the future, which was very affirming for me since I've kind of gone a little bit all in on YouTube over the last few years. So even for just pure audio, it was interesting to see that data. Matt, I know you were in that session with me.
Yes.
Was there anything else that you took away from that one in particular around the rise of video for podcasting, even if it's non-interview style video?
Right. There are still some holdouts that we definitely met at PodCamp who are like, if it's not just audio, it's not a podcast. And there has been some discussions that I've been in, and I think if you had to say what is a podcast, personally, I think it is something that has like an RSS feed or a way that there's availability to everyone everywhere, right? So it's not like a gate-kept, studio-made, somebody's making a decision what you can see or not see, right? Or hear or not hear. I don't think it matters if it has video or not, personally. One thing that I found really interesting, and I know that you had also mentioned this, is people who listen to the same show on different platforms at different times. So somebody might be like, they're in the car, so they're listening to the show, and they get like halfway through your show, and then they're on their laptop at work, or they're at the coffee shop, so they go on YouTube, they listen to the other half. So it could even be not just different episodes, different places, but they could even be listening to this parts of the same episode on different platforms. Another one that was, the statistics were not clear because the survey that they used for the statistics said, do you listen to shows on social media? But they didn't like split out which social media they were talking about. In one of the different talks, I can't remember whose talk it was now off the top of my head. Anyways, it was her opinion that you should put your entire show on social media as video. Instead of just saying, oh, you can go get my show on YouTube, or you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts or whatever. She's like, just put the whole show on, because the goal is to get more people hearing what you're saying. The goal is not necessarily to get verifiable subscribers on a certain platform. I mean, that could be someone's goal if you have an advertising metric you need to hit, right? If you could only track people who are on Spotify or YouTube, then you want to push everybody to those two platforms. But if you just want people hearing what you're going to say, then you should put it everywhere.
One big takeaway I got from, I think it was Katie's presentation, was like, don't be scared of spoilers. Don't be scared of, dropping the most important nuggets from your episode right in that promo, because it's like you got pocket aces with that, right? So you may as well use them, bet high. And I think that's something that really reframed how I thought of my own promotion, because the promotion is my least favorite part of this. Like when you've just spent so long recording, editing, fine-tuning, getting your images ready, and then you needed spend 4 more hours just engaging, pushing this online, making sure it's in the right channels, a tailored message for every group that might be interested. It just kind of gets exhausting. So I do think that this insights sort of made me reconsider this proposition and say, hey, let's just front load the most important stuff. When I edit it, let's just put the most important bits right at the front with my theme song, and just sort of make people know what they're going to get without being coy about it. And I think that, especially now, no one's got the luxury of time to sit through a 1-hour podcast. It's a maybe, right? So you got to convince them in that 5 minutes, and then after that, they've got the rest of the story. So yeah, that's something definitely actionable that I found. I find PodCamp is very much focused on the interviewing side, the relationship side, and then sometimes you get these bits of golden information that just sort of stick with you for weeks after. And I think that was definitely one of them.
There is definitely, in the podcasting world in general, people talk about interview shows more than any other show. And one thing that if you listen to this show on Digital Marketing Masters, you will probably notice that we have modified our format, and we have less kind of pure interview and kind of more editing and cutting up the interviews a little bit into kind of bite-sized quotes and things like that, because we're trying to make the most important bits more accessible to people. And I don't think that's for everyone. There's definitely places where I want to listen to the whole conversation. Even the parts that may not be as exciting as the other parts. But I also think for my own audience, people who are business owners, they're working in agencies, that kind of thing, they kind of need to get the important bits right away. And so I think that's really good advice. Maybe we'll put Marv's part about putting the important stuff at the beginning of this show. Ben, you looked like you were going to add something.
I always got something. Well, talking about interview shows, and so to me, the best tips on podcasting don't just make a better podcast, it makes for a better person. And podcasting is a communication channel. So what if we could, I almost said the word master, but we're constantly evolving. There's no mastery in communication. We can only get better and better. But what if we can become the best possible communicator for our podcast? And a couple of there were actually workshops that stood out to me. One was an improv workshop, and the other was like a connection conversation workshop. Now the improv workshop, without redoing the whole thing, what was fun is we actually like workshopped and did improv together. Everything from yes and to what's in the box, where someone describes what's in the box, you pass it to the next person, they add a little bit more description, and you're kind of building something together. And what is podcasting? It's a process of building something unique. What is a conversation? It's a process of building something unique. So that's where even the connection workshop came into play. It was well needed because a lot of people are lonely. They say there's possibly a loneliness epidemic occurring at this time because, I mean, starting with the pandemic, we've just been locked inside quite so much. That's why, I mean, as podcasters, when I'm recording virtually, I feel like I have a lot of conversations, but not quite as deep of a connection as when you're in person. And what we did in that workshop is literally just like took turns talking. We had partners, and she was, teaching empathetic listening and how sympathy and empathy are quite different. And we just talked about the real raw stuff. And it just reminds me, whether it's becoming better at improv so I can be better on the fly and better on the spot and a more entertaining communicator, or as a listener or as a speaker, how to be more empathetic, how to be more connected. This was a podcast event and 2 podcast related workshops, but I feel like it makes me a better person beyond just making me a better podcaster, because what happens when someone needs my listening ear, or what happens when I'm just having fun with my friends? I can goof off and improv and just have fun and not have things always be so heavy. So it's those hands-on experiences that always speak to me as well.
I agree. There's also something different about being in, not just in person, but in small groups in person. I think is a different dynamic than a one-on-one dynamic when you just like you and one person go and have a conversation or go for coffee. It's different when there's a group. It's almost like that kind of the idea of like the 3-body problem, where you could never really kind of predict what's going to happen. And I think that unpredictability of group helps kind of steer the conversation in places you would never have normally gone. Things like spirituality come up about 0 times in my podcast most often. It's just not a thing in digital marketing for the most part, right? But I talk to Sabrina regularly and we talk about those kinds of things. I think, the other people that we bring in, it's just not 5 of us hanging out with all the 5 of us, right? There's other people that we kind of met at different places and different events that we had conversations with as well. And also the things that are happening to you, like you go out for dinner together and you find out like somebody is vegan or allergic to a certain kind of food or something, right? Or, the interactions people have with other people around you, and there's something different about it. And I think a lot of that has been kind of lost in the era that we're in. I don't want to be like soapboxing about, how everybody's lonely kind of thing. But I think our use of internet devices and everything being tailored to us specifically all the time lends itself to us having less kind of small group interactions.
And Matt, it also lends to being more performative. And just when you're hanging out with a group, you didn't hit record. You're not trying to impress anyone. That's where the magic happens, because there's a lot of performative stuff going on online, and we're whole people. We're not perfect.
Are you saying that people aren't 100% authentic all the time?
No, I think people actually pretend to be authentic, but we could go on a big digression. People pretend to be authentic for likes, but they're performing.
That's right. I think there's definitely something to be said for the times that you're hanging out with people and there's no recording going on. Also, it kind of gives you a little bit more freedom, right? You're free to speak your mind and say something that you may not necessarily have said if the recording was on. And I don't mean something bad or like racist or something, right? I mean like it's a different way to test the waters having a conversation with somebody when the recording is off than when it's on and you gotta like keep up, you don't want something to be misinterpreted or, whatever, right? I think there's definitely something different about, in-person interactions. Do you want to let us know where is the best place people can find your show? Why don't we start with Sabrina?
So I've actually got all of my show in all of the different formats, all on my website, just to make it really easy for everyone. So just pop on over to sabrinamscott.com, and then there's a little drop-down menu that says podcasts, and you'll be able to scroll through both of my shows, find one episode that you like, and then click through to whatever platform you want to watch it on.
Marv?
So I publish on Spotify, but I do think my Substack would be the best place to be subscribing, because it's called Hello from Marv@substack.com, because a lot of the episodes tend to be, I don't want to interrupt my guest in the flow, and sometimes I like reflecting on stuff that they've said, turn out into full articles. So I do think the Substack would be the best place for you to get the most complete idea. And I, of course, include every single upload on the Substack, so you'd get an email about that directly.
What's the name of your Substack?
Substack is hellofrommarv.substack.com.
Nice. Mahek, where are you going to be publishing?
We're still deciding that, but I'm pretty sure we'll definitely be on Apple Podcasts, and I'm working towards building the website as well. So it's going to be called betweennowandnext.ca. So that's where you can find me.
Nice, Ben.
So I just rolled out of bed and started talking on a mic. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this podcast, Digital Marketing Masters. So I'm telling this to the listener. Click 5 stars here, click a thumbs up here, leave a comment, bonus points or brownie points, send someone a DM, because a lot of work is going behind the scenes to make this possible. Real Business Connections is my podcast. So you can just search Real Business Connections in the player that you found this, or just Google it, or go to realbusinessconnections.com. And I'm easy to find, but show some love here first, because these two made it happen. And I appreciate being with everyone today.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate you talking about all the work that we do here.
You've been listening to the Digital Marketing Masters podcast. For more conversations at the intersection of technology and humanity, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your co-host, Mahek Anam, and thank you so much for tuning in today.